Austin, Texas garage mechanic Jackson Rodriguez was just trying to fix an oil leak on his custom Harley before picking up his daughter from her medical appointment. The crowd of bikers surrounding him had no idea that the tattooed man in the worn leather vest wasn't just another outlaw drifter, but a decorated former Special Forces operative now working 3 jobs to pay for his child's specialized treatments. Jackson was dressed in his usual work clothes, a stained white tank top under his father's old leather vest, looking every bit the stereotype that local cops loved to harass. He was on a tight schedule, needing to get his bike running before his daughter's therapy session ended. As he worked under the hood, the garage owner approached nervously. "Brother, I hate to tell you this, but you might want to take the back roads today." Jackson looked up from his wrench, grease staining his heavily tattooed forearms. "What's the problem, Sal?" The older man glanced toward the street. "There's this corrupt patrol officer, Holloway, who's been shaking down every biker in this district. The guy writes bogus tickets and demands cash payments on the spot. And if you refuse—" Sal shook his head. "Let's just say he's not above getting physical. I don't know what kind of luck you'll have today, but God help you if you run into Officer Holloway right now. That badge has made him think he's untouchable." Jackson's jaw tightened as he considered this. Was what Sal was saying really true? Did this officer actually terrorize working-class bikers just trying to make an honest living? Before he could finish the thought, the distinctive whine of a patrol car's engine echoed through the garage. Through the open bay doors, they could see Officer Marcus Holloway stepping out of his cruiser, adjusting his badge with the kind of swagger that screamed abuse of power. As soon as Holloway spotted the row of motorcycles, his eyes lit up like a predator who'd found easy prey. He strutted toward the garage, hand already reaching for his citation book. Well, Holloway announced loudly, his voice dripping with manufactured authority. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little biker convention here. You there, tattoo boy, step away from that bike. You think you can just work on stolen merchandise in broad daylight?" Jackson straightened slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow as he faced the officer. His expression remained calm, but those who knew him could see the controlled fury building behind his eyes. "Officer, this is my bike. I have all the paperwork right here." "Papers can be forged," Holloway sneered, pulling out his ticket book with theatrical flourish. "I'm writing you up for operating a suspicious vehicle, disturbing the peace, and—" He paused, enjoying the moment. "Let's call it failure to respect law enforcement. That'll be $800 in fines, payable immediately, or I'm impounding this piece of junk and taking you downtown." Standing in the background, the garage crowd watched in stunned silence, many instinctively reaching for their phones. Among them were several tech-savvy locals who had been documenting police misconduct using new AI-powered legal apps that could instantly identify civil rights violations. Jackson remained perfectly still, his voice steady but ice-cold. "Officer, I haven't broken any laws. I'm just a working father trying to fix my transportation so I can pick up my daughter from her medical appointment." Holloway's face twisted with cruel satisfaction. "Oh, you're one of those types, hiding behind the kid excuse. Tell you what, tough guy, maybe a night in county will teach you some respect." Without warning, he shoved Jackson hard against the motorcycle. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised higher, but Jackson didn't retaliate. He simply looked down at his watch, a high-tech device that most assumed was just another biker accessory. What Officer Holloway didn't know was that this wasn't just any watch. And Jackson wasn't just any biker. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," Jackson said quietly, his voice carrying a military precision that made several onlookers step back. But Holloway was too drunk on his own power to notice the warning. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt as Officer Marcus Halloway circled Jackson's Harley like a shark smelling blood in the water. His polished boots clicked against the concrete with each deliberate step, the sound echoing through the open garage bay where a dozen other bikers had suddenly gone silent. "You know what I think?" Halloway said, running his finger along the bike's chrome exhaust pipe. "I think this beauty here has some very interesting history, the kind that might not show up in your so-called paperwork." He straightened up, his chest puffed out with the kind of arrogance that came from years of unopposed authority. "Serial numbers can tell quite a story, and this one's got me curious." Jackson kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening despite every instinct screaming at him to put this corrupt cop in his place. "Officer, I purchased this bike legally 3 years ago. I have the title, registration, and bill of sale in my saddlebag. Everything's in order." "Oh, I'm sure it all looks very official," Halloway laughed, the sound grating like nails on metal. "But you'd be amazed how creative some people get with documentation these days, especially people like you." His eyes swept over Jackson's tattoos with undisguised contempt. "What do we have here? Military ink? Gang symbols, prison work? Hard to tell where one criminal career ends and another begins." The comment about prison work hit closer to home than Halloway could have known. Not because Jackson had been an inmate, but because he'd spent 18 months undercover in maximum security facilities during his Special Forces days, gathering intelligence on domestic terror networks. Those tattoos weren't gang symbols. They were carefully crafted covers that had nearly cost him his life more than once. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, standing in this dusty garage with motor oil under his fingernails, Jackson was just a father trying to make ends meet. The memory of why he was working so hard came flooding back to him like it did every time someone questioned his character. 3 months earlier, he'd sat in his apartment's cramped kitchen at 2 a.m., his laptop screen glowing in the darkness as his 8-year-old daughter Emma slept peacefully in the next room. The medical bills spread across his table told a story no father should have to read. Stage 2 juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, experimental treatment protocols, insurance denials, and costs that would have broken most families. He typed his questions into ChatGPT with the desperation of a man running out of options. What are the most effective treatments for juvenile rheumatoid arthritis? What clinical trials are available for children? How can a single parent navigate insurance appeals for experimental medications? The AI had provided detailed responses about biologics, immunotherapy, and cutting-edge treatments at specialized children's hospitals. But every promising avenue ended with the same brutal reality. Money. Lots of money. More money than a garage mechanic could make in 5 lifetimes. That's when Jackson had made his decision. He'd taken the night security job at the shipping yard, picked up weekend construction work, and started doing motorcycle repairs on the side. 18-hour days became his normal. Sleep became a luxury. But Emma's smile when the new medication started working? That made every aching muscle and every moment of exhaustion worth it. The memory dissolved as Halloway's voice cut through his thoughts. "Hey, tattoo boy, you having some kind of episode over there? I asked you a question." "I was just thinking about my paperwork, officer. Like I said, everything's legal and documented." Halloway's smile turned predatory. "Here's the thing about documentation. Sometimes it takes a real expert to spot the forgeries. Lucky for you, I happen to be very good at spotting inconsistencies." He leaned against the bike, his bulk causing the suspension to creak. Now, a thorough investigation like that takes time. Paperwork needs to be filed. Evidence needs to be processed. Could take weeks, maybe months. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a burning tire. Around the garage, other bikers exchanged glances, recognizing the shakedown for what it was. But here's the good news, Holloway continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm a reasonable man. I understand that working folks like yourself can't afford to have their transportation tied up in legal proceedings. So I might be willing to expedite this whole process for, say, a small administrative fee. What kind of fee are we talking about? Jackson asked, though he already knew where this was heading. Well, considering the complexity of the investigation, the paperwork involved, the man-hours required, Holloway paused dramatically. I'd say $1,000 should cover it. Cash, of course. Administrative fees are always cash. The number hit Jackson like a physical blow. $1,000 was Emma's medication for 2 months. It was the deposit he'd been saving for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. It was groceries, utilities, and hope rolled into one impossible demand. Officer, I don't have that kind of money on me. I'm just a working man trying to. Then you better figure out where to get it, and fast. Holloway interrupted. Because if this bike disappears into the evidence locker, you won't see it again for a very long time. And something tells me you can't afford to miss work while you're hoofing it around town. That's when the phones came out. Sal, the garage owner, was the first to raise his device, followed quickly by 3 other bikers who'd been watching the shakedown with growing anger. But these weren't just ordinary recordings. Unknown to Holloway, several members of this particular biker community worked in Austin's thriving tech sector, and they'd been experimenting with new applications that could stream directly to secure cloud servers while simultaneously analyzing police interactions for civil rights violations. What the hell do you think you're doing? Holloway barked, noticing the phones for the first time. Just documenting a police interaction for safety purposes, officer, said Maria, a software engineer who rode a custom Triumph on weekends. It's perfectly legal to record public officials performing their duties. Holloway's face flushed red. Put those damn phones away before I confiscate them as evidence of obstruction. Can't do that, officer, called out another biker, a cybersecurity specialist named Derek. These streams are already uploaded to multiple cloud servers. Even if you took our phones, the footage would still exist. The technological trap was more sophisticated than it appeared. Derek's custom app wasn't just recording. It was using real-time audio analysis to identify specific legal violations, automatically timestamping potential civil rights infractions, and cross-referencing Holloway's badge number against a database of civilian complaints. Every word was being processed, categorized, and documented in ways that would have impressed federal prosecutors. Holloway's frustration was boiling over, but he was too committed to his shakedown to back down now. Instead, he decided to dig deeper, thinking he could intimidate Jackson into compliance through more personal means. Let's see what else we can find here, he muttered, moving toward Jackson's saddlebags. Maybe there's something in your personal effects that might explain this sudden memory loss about where you got this bike. Officer, those are my personal belongings. You don't have probable cause to. I've got plenty of cause, Holloway snapped, unzipping the leather bag. Suspected stolen vehicle gives me all the authority I need. He rummaged through the contents. Work gloves, basic tools, a thermos, and a small photo in a protective plastic sleeve. Holloway pulled out the picture and his cruel smile returned. The photo showed Emma at her last birthday party. Her thin frame dwarfed by the hospital bed, but her smile radiant as she held up 8 fingers. The medical bracelet on her wrist was clearly visible, along with the 4 line that had become a permanent fixture in her young life. Well, what do we have here? Holloway held up the photo so the crowd could see. Looks like Daddy's got himself a little sick kid. That explains the desperation. His voice took on a mocking tone. What's wrong with her? Something expensive, I bet. Something that requires a lot of Creative fundraising? The garage fell completely silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Even the phones seemed to focus more intently, as if the devices themselves understood they were witnessing something beyond ordinary corruption. Jackson's entire body went rigid. His hands, which had remained calmly at his sides throughout the encounter, slowly curled into fists. When he spoke, his voice carried a deadly quiet that made several bikers take an involuntary step backward. "Officer, I suggest you put that photo down and step away from my bike." But Holloway was too intoxicated by his own power to recognize the warning. Instead, he held the photo higher, waving it like a trophy. "Ah, did I hit a nerve? Tell you what, tough guy. Maybe we can work out a payment plan. Kid looks like she's gonna need daddy around for a long time. Be a real shame if something happened to disrupt that relationship." He leaned closer to the photo, examining it with theatrical interest. Course, medical bills can be pretty overwhelming. Sometimes desperate parents do desperate things. Makes you wonder what other corners might have been cut to afford all that treatment. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Around the garage, phones captured every word, every gesture, every second of what was rapidly becoming the end of Officer Marcus Holloway's career. Jackson looked down at his watch, not to check the time, but to activate a feature that most people would have mistaken for a fitness tracker notification. The device pulsed once, then twice, sending a coded signal that traveled through encrypted channels to recipients who had been waiting months for exactly this moment. "Officer Holloway," Jackson said, his voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of a man who'd once commanded elite soldiers in life-or-death situations. "You have exactly 30 seconds to return my daughter's photograph and step away from my motorcycle." "Or what?" Holloway laughed, still waving the photo. "You gonna file a complaint? Take me to court? With what money, biker boy? You can't even afford to keep your sick kid healthy without." He never finished the sentence. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the afternoon air like a blade, growing louder by the second. But these weren't ordinary police sirens. The pitch was different, more urgent, carrying the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. Holloway's face went pale as 3 black SUVs screamed into the garage parking lot, followed by 2 unmarked sedans and a mobile command unit. Armed federal agents poured out of the vehicles with military precision, their weapons drawn and their focus laser-sharp on one target: Officer Marcus Holloway. Federal agents. Nobody move. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The sight of federal agents surrounding the garage should have been enough to make any reasonable officer stand down. But Marcus Holloway had crossed too many lines to think clearly now. His face twisted with rage and desperation as he realized his carefully constructed world of corruption was crumbling around him in real time. "This is bullshit," he screamed, still clutching Emma's photograph. "I don't know what kind of setup this is, but I'm a sworn police officer conducting a legitimate investigation." The lead federal agent, a tall woman with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen every variety of corrupt cop, stepped forward with her badge held high. "Agent Rebecca Sterling, FBI Public Corruption Unit. Officer Holloway, you need to step back from the civilian and place your hands where we can see them." But Holloway was beyond rational thought now. The walls were closing in, and his reptilian brain had kicked into survival mode. He'd spent years believing his badge made him untouchable, that he could terrorize working-class people with impunity. The idea that his victims might have connections, might have protection, had never occurred to him. "You have no jurisdiction here," he shouted at Agent Sterling. "This is local police business. I don't care what badges you're flashing. You can't interfere with an active investigation." "Officer, this is your final warning," Sterling replied, her voice calm but carrying the authority of someone backed by the full weight of the federal government. Step away from the civilian and surrender the evidence you removed from his personal property. Instead of complying, Holloway made the worst decision of his already catastrophic day. Spinning toward Jackson with Emma's photo still in his hand, he raised his free arm and delivered a vicious backhand slap across Jackson's face. The sound echoed through the garage like a gunshot. Every phone camera captured the moment in high-definition detail. The federal agents tensed, several reaching for their weapons as they recognized the tactical situation Holloway was trying to create. "He assaulted me," Holloway screamed, dropping the photo and reaching for his service weapon. "The suspect attacked a police officer. I'm defending myself." It was a desperate, clumsy attempt to manufacture justification for what everyone present knew would be his next move. In Holloway's twisted logic, if he could provoke Jackson into fighting back, he could claim self-defense for whatever violence followed. He'd done it before with other victims who hadn't had federal protection. But Jackson didn't move. The slap had snapped his head to the side, leaving a red mark across his cheek, but his hands remained calmly at his sides. When he turned back to face Holloway, his expression was perfectly controlled. Not the rage of a provoked biker, but the cold professionalism of a soldier who'd been trained to handle far worse situations. "Officer," Jackson said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent garage, "you just committed aggravated assault against a federal witness in front of a dozen cameras and half the FBI's public corruption unit." Holloway's hand froze halfway to his weapon as the implications hit him. Federal witness. The words cut through his rage like ice water, bringing a moment of terrible clarity. Jackson's watch pulsed again, this time with a distinctive pattern that indicated secure communication protocols were fully activated. He glanced down at the device, a piece of technology far more sophisticated than any civilian smartwatch, and spoke just loud enough for the recording devices to capture his words. "The feed is live at the Department of Justice." The statement wasn't meant for Holloway or even the crowd of bikers. It was confirmation to federal prosecutors who had been watching the entire encounter through encrypted channels, waiting for exactly this moment. For months, they'd been building a case against the corrupt officers in Holloway's precinct, but they needed irrefutable evidence of civil rights violations committed in the presence of federal agents. Holloway had just given them everything they needed. "What feed?" he stammered, his hand still hovering near his weapon. "What are you talking about?" Agent Sterling stepped closer, her team moving into tactical positions around the garage. "Officer Holloway, I'm placing you under arrest for violation of civil rights under color of law, assault on a federal witness, and conspiracy to commit extortion." "Federal witness?" Holloway's voice cracked. "He's just some biker trash. Look at him." That's when Agent Sterling did something that would haunt Holloway for the rest of his life. She walked past him entirely, approached Jackson with obvious respect, and extended her hand. "Colonel Rodriguez," she said, using a rank that made every person in the garage, including the other federal agents, turn and stare. "Thank you for your patience with this operation. I know it wasn't easy putting yourself in this position." Colonel Rodriguez. The title hung in the air like a revelation that rewrote everything everyone thought they knew about the tattooed biker in work clothes. Jackson shook Agent Sterling's hand with the easy familiarity of colleagues who'd worked together before. "Agent Sterling, I'm just glad we finally have what we need to clean up this precinct." Holloway's world tilted on its axis. "Colonel? He's military." "Former Special Forces," Sterling explained, though her words were clearly meant for the recording devices rather than Holloway's benefit. "Decorated veteran of 3 combat deployments. Currently working as a federal consultant on police corruption cases." She paused, looking directly at Holloway. "He's been documenting your extortion activities for the past 6 months. The garage erupted in shocked murmurs as the bikers processed this information. Sal, the garage owner, let out a low whistle. Jesus, Jax. All this time you've been just doing a job that needed doing, Jackson interrupted gently. He bent down to retrieve Emma's photograph from where Holloway had dropped it, carefully tucking it back into its protective sleeve. Though I have to admit, it became personal when you threatened my daughter. Holloway was backing toward his patrol car now, his hands still near his weapon, his eyes darting between the federal agents like a cornered animal. This is entrapment. You set me up. No, officer. Agent Sterling corrected. You set yourself up. We just gave you enough rope. That's when Holloway made his final, fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering, he drew his weapon. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. 6 federal agents had their guns trained on him before his service pistol cleared its holster. Red laser dots danced across his chest and forehead. The garage, which had been buzzing with conversation moments before, fell completely silent except for the mechanical clicking of safeties being released. Drop your weapon, Sterling commanded. Drop it now. But Holloway was beyond rational thought. Years of unchecked power and corruption had convinced him that he was above consequences, that his badge would protect him even now. He raised his pistol toward Jackson, apparently believing he could still salvage the situation by eliminating the witness. He never got the chance to fire. 3 federal agents tackled him simultaneously, driving him face first into the concrete with enough force to crack his badge against the asphalt. His weapon skittered away across the garage floor as zip-tie restraints appeared around his wrists with military efficiency. Marcus Holloway, Agent Sterling announced as her team hauled the disgraced officer to his feet. You're under arrest for violations of Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. You're also being charged with assault on a federal agent, attempted murder of a federal witness, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. As they read him his rights, Holloway's face was a mask of disbelief and rage. This isn't over, he screamed as they dragged him toward one of the black SUVs. You think you're so smart, but this isn't over. I've got connections. I've got friends. Agent Sterling watched impassively as her team loaded Holloway into the vehicle. Your connections are why we've been investigating this precinct for 2 years, officer. Half your friends are already cooperating with federal prosecutors. The SUV doors slammed shut, muffling Holloway's continued protests. As the convoy prepared to leave, Sterling turned back to Jackson and the crowd of stunned bikers. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your cooperation with this investigation. The recordings you made today will be crucial evidence in prosecuting not just Officer Holloway, but several other corrupt officials in this precinct. She paused, looking directly at the phones that were still recording. Your willingness to document police misconduct helps ensure that officers like Holloway can't continue abusing their authority. As the federal vehicles drove away, the garage slowly began returning to normal. Bikers clustered around Jackson, peppered him with questions, slapped him on the back with newfound respect. But he seemed more concerned with checking his watch and gathering his tools. I hate to cut this short, he said, wiping his hands on a shop rag, but I need to pick up my daughter from her appointment. She's probably wondering where I am. Sal approached him with something like awe in his eyes. Jax, or should I say Colonel, there's something I've been meaning to ask. Those medical bills for Emma, we all knew money was tight, but if you're working with the feds. Jackson's smile was the first genuine expression of happiness anyone had seen from him all day. Actually, Sal, that's going to work out just fine. Federal whistleblower protections include compensation for cooperation with major corruption investigations. Emma's medical bills will be covered, and then some. He started his Harley, the engine purring to life with a deep, satisfied rumble. As he prepared to leave, Agent Sterling approached one final time. "Colonel, the Justice Department wants you to know that your work on this case was exceptional. We couldn't have built a case this strong without your patience and professionalism." "Just glad I could help clean up the streets," Jackson replied, "especially for the working folks who couldn't fight back on their own." As he rode away toward his daughter's medical appointment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the garage, the bikers who remained behind were still processing what they'd witnessed. Corrupt cops brought to justice. A decorated war hero revealed among their ranks. And most importantly, proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually worked the way it was supposed to. The phones that had captured everything were already uploading their footage to social media platforms, where the story would spread like wildfire. Within hours, #JusticeServed and #BikerColonel would be trending nationwide, and Officer Marcus Halloway would become a cautionary tale about what happened when corrupt cops picked the wrong target. But for Jackson Rodriguez, the real victory was simpler and more personal. As he pulled into the children's hospital parking lot, he could see Emma waiting by the window of the therapy clinic, her face lighting up when she spotted his motorcycle. Her treatment would continue without interruption now. Her future was secure, and her father could finally sleep soundly, knowing that one small corner of the world was a little bit safer for working families just trying to get by. The garage behind him had returned to its normal rhythm of engines and conversation, but something fundamental had changed. The phones in everyone's pockets felt a little more powerful. The badge-heavy swagger of corrupt cops felt a little less intimidating. And the idea that ordinary people could fight back against injustice felt a little more real. Sometimes justice came from courtrooms and legal proceedings. Sometimes it came from federal investigations and whistleblower protection programs. But today, in a dusty Austin garage, it had come from a single father who refused to be intimidated, a community that refused to look away, and the simple truth that even the most corrupt abuse of power eventually meets its match. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going.